So I want to talk about two names in the news last month and this month. And of course, the one that probably comes to mind is Meta, right? Facebook's rebranding of their service. And because we do so much new product and new service naming in our work, where we've been asked what we think of that name. And I'm of two minds. First of all, I think it's a brilliant name. Anybody who's done naming work knows how hard it is to find a name that, is memorable and simple and short and available. Yes. But just generally, I think it's a brilliant name. But I also think it's a big mistake for Facebook for two reasons. One, the press and the public perceived it as a head fake, right, for all the negative publicity that they've been getting in recent months, number one. And number two, it's sort of a wish unfulfilled. We have a preconception about what Facebook is. It doesn't leverage that. And yes, I understand they're trying to create a new universe, right, with the meta universe, but they're not there yet. And so for those two reasons, I think it's a premature thing and therefore not advised. You contrast that with, Google with Alphabet, you're thinking companies A to Z, right? Which is also a brilliant name in my opinion, but they were buying literally hundreds of companies before they made that shift. So that's what we think about Meta. The second name that's been in the news that you may or may not have heard of, but is probably in some ways even more profound in its ramifications for the project is, of course, Lucy, the Lucy spacecraft, which was launched in October. It was the 13th Discovery mission, as they call them, funded by NASA. There's 16 currently funded. So this one went off, and its goal is to really assess and understand sort of the origin of the solar system, right? And they're going to do that with some leftovers in the orbit of Jupiter. This is the Trojan asteroid ring. This is a 12-year mission. It's extraordinary, frankly. They're going to slingshot by the Earth 2 times so that they can look at asteroids that are sort of in front of Jupiter and the asteroids that are behind Jupiter. And what they're looking for is, primordial organic material. That's one of the things they're looking for, which will help them understand the sort of origin of the solar system. So why the name Lucy? Well, this starts actually more than 50 years ago in London, this name. There was a mom who named her cute girl Lucy. She was at preschool. She was at preschool with another student who was 3 years old, a boy, and he saw her and she thought she was cute and he liked her, so he did a drawing of her. He brought it home, and it was a very fantastical drawing. He brought it home. Oh, that's Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. And of course, this was John Lennon and his son Julian. So that led to, of course, the seminal work, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, on the 1967 Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. By the way, just a side note, the reason they called it Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band is because they felt they were limited by the perception of what a Beatles song is and isn't. So that's why they, quote, in their minds and their imagination, role-played this entirely new band. It gave them the freedom to explore new opportunities and new forms of music. So we've got Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds as a song. We flow forward here 7 years later. We're in Ethiopia. And there's a team of archaeologists looking for missing links in the evolution of man. They were at the dig site. They took a detour on the way back to the camp. They see a bone sticking out of the mud, believe it or not. They check it out, and it leads to the discovery of a hominin 3.5 million years old that was one of the important links in the evolution of man. They were dancing around the campfire that night because they were so excited about their discovery. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds was actually on the radio, and that they were dancing to it. And so they said, well, let's call it Lucy, and which is what they did. So now we're, a few years back when the projects are getting funded from the Discovery program. Okay, the leaders of the Lucy mission, it hadn't been called that yet, but they said, well, let's call this Lucy. And what's the connection here? Which I thought was so brilliant. They were leveraging, if you will, a court of familiarity, sort of previous knowledge, in that Lucy was about understanding the evolution of man. And the Lucy spacecraft is what? About understanding the evolution of our solar system. So it was a brilliant connection. And then they made an even another connection in the PR when the leader of the project said, yeah, this is going to be Lucy. It's going to be in the sky, and we're going to discover diamonds of information and insight. So it's a wonderful story. It's wonderful naming. It's short, it's memorable, it's relevant. It's important in your name. The key idea here, I think, the key takeaway for the listeners is if you can find a name, that's available and short and memorable, but that has a story associated with it, it can be that much more powerful because the story helps you remember it, but it also, frankly, gives you PR opportunities. We showed his dad, and his dad said,